25 new supermarkets open every month in the United Kingdom. At the beginning of 1963, it was estimated there were 1,200 supermarkets throughout the country, doing 11% of the total grocery turnover. By 1970, this number is likely to be 4,000, doing 33%, that's a third of the total grocery business. So you will see how important this development is. And its principles and operating methods are spreading to a large proportion of retail outlets throughout the country. This film shows you some of the business methods employed in supermarket retailing. It can't show you them all, but it does emphasize the major ones. Now, there's no complete agreement among supermarket operators concerning the principles and the operating methods, and therefore there is a variety of different ways in which they apply them. Running a supermarket is still largely an art, but it is becoming more of a science, as the managers engaged in this operation analyze and measure their decisions in greater detail.
Some of the first policy decisions are taken at boardroom level. This board is discussing a site for the new supermarket.
Heard of a development there, which I think is quite interesting to us all. Would you like to just tell us about the one you've heard of, John?
Well, basically it's on the edge of the high street, and the main frontage is a very good one. It's about 100 feet. The return depth is not as great as we wish, but I feel that we could get our usual stock assortment into that sort of area. What do you feel, Alan? Well,
here is the general manager of a large supermarket concern and his fellow managers in the sales, production, development, accounting and staff departments discussing the opening of a new supermarket. Most companies are able to estimate pretty accurately the number of customers they can expect in a new store. If customer potential is 12,500 a week and the average purchase per visit is 12 shillings, then the estimated turnover a week will be £7,500. Thus, the sales area needed at 30 shillings a square foot per week must equal 2/3 of 7,500, which is 5,000 square feet. It is all very carefully calculated at this initial stage. Mr. Fairclough, Development Services Manager, sums it up.
And our battle is always to get as much of the site over to selling as we possibly can. But we certainly would put a turnover figure to the potential that we saw in the area. And having once got that turnover figure, we convert it at a rate which, for the sake of this interview, let us say is 30 shillings per square foot, to the area that we would devote to selling on the site. Now, normally, we operate on a 50-50 basis in terms of the building between selling and storage. And by storage, I mean warehouse and staff accommodation managers' quarters. Of course, in terms of exploitation of the site, that 50-50 ratio would probably turn into something like 50% building to 50% car park, if we are fortunate enough to have a site where we can really develop the car park element, which is becoming of increasing importance to us.
Working in close cooperation with this management is the local property developer, who finds a site near the area chosen, a developing residential area, at the dimensions required. After that, local planning permission is sometimes held up for as much as 3 years. Mr. Ramsey, the accountant, told me some of his other problems.
But once you've found it, the thing that I've got to interest myself in is the method upon which one is going to acquire it, whether by a capital investment in a site or whether to obtain a lease from a developer.
I asked him what would be a reasonable yield from capital employed for a store.
I suppose a reasonable yield would be looked upon as something around 14 or 15% of the capital investment. Our tendency, as a rule, is not to look at it quite in those terms, but to consider more the sort of return we hope to get on the turnover that we anticipate from that particular project.
A rough guide to the capital involved is £10 per square foot of store. Capital outlay at £10 per square foot equals 7,000 times £10, which is £70,000. The net profit per year before tax at 2.5% of turnover is £9,500. The yield is then found by expressing the net profits as a percentage of the capital invested. Thus, the yield on the capital outlay is approximately 14%. Mr. Ramsey told me what rate of stock turnover he aimed for and how he calculated it.
Well, it depends upon the particular merchandise. We've got certain groups of merchandise, of which grocery provisions is the major one, and we expect a stock turn of something like 25 times per year in our grocery provision range. In our non-food, the stock turn is rather slower. We look upon something like 10 times a year as being an adequate level of stock holding there. The calculation of stock turn is merely a division of the total turnover for the year at the retail selling price by the average of the stock holding throughout the year, also at the retail selling price.
Total annual sales on a range of 5,000 items here is estimated at £390,000. If we divide this by the retail value of our average stock inventory, which is £23,000, it gives a stock turn of 17 as an average. Fast-moving lines, 25 or more. Slow-moving lines, 10 or less. This calculation is done for each line as a further check. Some stores have a stock assortment of 30,000 items, but most stores carry between 4,000 and 5,000 lines. Mr. Murray, the sales manager, spoke about this.
We have a lot of experience of this in the past, and we base our knowledge on the stock assortment on the size of the shop and what we consider any particular area can carry.
Mr. Murray, your own head office obviously controls policy on most things. Is there in fact a head office policy in your group on the amount of space that you allocate?
Yes, we do. Here again, we know from past experience just how much space that we want to give to any particular commodity group in our shops. For example, we know that we can't do a good job on baby foods on less than 7 foot of fixture space.
A typical breakdown of space allocation, according to the turnover, would be meat 11%, provisions 10%, green grocery 8%, delicatessen 2%, groceries 54%, non-foods 15%. Now, how about promotions?
Normally we run a fortnightly promotion program. This is the main promotions in groceries and non-foods, which we try and link up 4 or 5 times a year with an outside manufacturer's advertising campaign.
This is linked closely with the image the stores are trying to create. Mr. Tobias, the production manager, explained.
Well, firstly, we try and give a store character. We try and create an image of value with good merchandise at competitive prices. This must be linked with a number of other things, such as hygiene, a good standard of packaging, first-class presentation. The decor of the shop must be good. The correct type of lighting used in each group of merchandise. A wide stock assortment, and this is something that we carry. A first-class service to our customers with personal attention. We train our personnel from branch manager to rank and file. They have a leadership from our head office, and they are informed of our promotions and the style in which they will run, the standard of window dressing, the advertising that goes on the window. It's pretty uniform throughout the group.
On the question of staff, we asked Mr. Sayward, the staff manager, to tell us what basic information he started with.
Before planning the establishment of a new unit, there is certain basic facts that I must have. First of all, I must know the estimated sales of the total store. Secondly, I need to know the numbers and types of merchandising departments that will be contained in the store. And thirdly, of course, I must know the opening date as near as it can be given. Having received this basic information, I then set about planning the management structure. That is to say, how many managers we shall require, how many section managers, and so on. Once this backbone of the store has been established, then we get down to planning the overall basic establishment through all grades of staff. In doing this, we plan how many weeks ahead we shall have to recruit each type and grade of staff, and consider any particular problems.
So, before the opening of a new supermarket, top-level policy is thrashed out, and the ultimate responsibility is, of course, taken by the general manager, Mr. Jerram. He talked to us about some of the problems connected with stock.
Well, of course, it is a costly business to store your goods centrally and deliver them. But the main consideration, I suppose, is, of course, is it an economic proposition? Do we get it at a cheaper price by so doing? There are many side issues to this. By central delivery, you have a far greater control over your stock holdings at branch level. The normal branch manager, of course, is an enthusiastic salesman, and so he will automatically always overstock, hoping to sell the goods. If he knows there's a central warehouse with reserve stocks, he will not do this because he can call on additional stocks quite quickly. Also, if a branch manager buys locally all the time, it's a very time-consuming operation as far as he's concerned. He's taken away from his main function, and that is selling our goods in the shops if he's tied up all day with representatives, as one is apt to be if everything is bought locally. On the other hand, there are certain items, and these are mainly bulk, fast-moving items. I'm thinking of sugar, detergents, soap powders, that it would be uneconomical to hold in a central warehouse. The turnover is so vast that the labour force involved in unloading, loading, unloading, loading is just not worth it, and those things we would have delivered direct to stores.
Mr. Jerram has to take into account the cost of warehousing and the mileage involved in delivery from head office. How much money should be tied up in stock at any one time? The general aim is to stockpile 2 weeks' supply of groceries and 3 weeks' supply of non-foods. Stock is constantly reviewed to get rid of slow runners and to make way for more promising lines. Extra lines can sometimes be added by increasing the size of gondolas. 54%, a large proportion of stock, is groceries, which includes soap and detergents. Non-foods vary from 10 to 15%. A very tight stock control system is necessary.
The method of retailing certainly has changed from the corner street shop. There is more at stake than in the days of one-man capital and one-man business. Here is a supermarket with 17,000 square feet of selling space and 30,000 items to sell. Yes, supermarkets are big business, with over £200 million turnover. And by 1970, there might be something like £3,000 million invested in them. To start any supermarket such as this one from scratch is quite an undertaking. But one man is still responsible for organizing it into an efficient business, and that man is the store manager. I asked Mr. Warrington, the manager of this store, selling over 5,000 lines, how he set about it.
Mr. Warrington, how big is your store?
5,000 square feet selling space.
Well, how much turnover now do you do with that space?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a week.
Well, is the responsibility for this entirely yours?
No, we're assisted terrifically by the top management, and the assistance they give us is very, very useful.
Now, you've been talking about cooperation with top management. How, in fact, does this work?
It's broken into departments, and the merchandise department would help us with the actual merchandising themselves. The services department would help us with the general fixturing and the layout, and the top management would lay down their different sort of promotions and their policies for trading.
How does this layout work? Why, in fact, has it been done in this particular way?
An entrance is made to the side of the supermarket, which comes up to here, so that all our goods were taken into the rear of the building. And if we can get the goods into the store without interfering with the actual selling space, this is a pretty big point in our favour.
I noticed that all the meat is pre-packed. Does it, in fact, arrive here this way?
Oh, no. It arrives in bulk. It's unloaded straight into the pre-packing room, where it is all pre-packed and then taken at the shortest possible distance back into the cabinet in the store.
Is this pre-packing room an enormous place?
Quite a fair size. Essentially about 4 or 5 cutters working in there, and the meat is cut and then taken into a pre-packing bench where the girls pre-pack and place straight into the cabinet. We're covered here by the hygiene. The public health department are very particular about this, where we have to have special wash basins and et cetera, so this means that it's pretty essential that the pre-packing room and the cabinet must be fairly easily accessible to each other.
The meat now here at the back, is that merely because it's near where it's unloaded?
We found that the customer flow into the store is almost always prompted to the meat counter.
Which is why you put it at the back of the store, I see.
Yes.
Then, as you come in the entrance, I notice that you go around clockwise. Is there any particular reason for doing this, or doesn't it matter?
The reason for this in this particular store is just to the sort of, in that position of the store, where our entrance is on the left-hand side coming into the store. There's a market square, pedestrian crossing, several bus stops, and the flow of customers into the high street appeared to be into our left-hand side, in other words, into the left-hand side of our store.
I see.
The customer came to the left-hand door. We wanted to get her as soon as possible, and we put the entrance on the left-hand side.
Now, just inside the entrance door, you've got an enormous pile of baskets and nothing else. Now, why have you done it in this way?
Yes.
Is this deliberate?
Yes. We try to prevent the customer from infiltrating into the bed of the store too quickly. In other words, we'd like her to take the whole length of the store, where she passes a great deal of her merchandise, and gives the customer a good chance to come in and infiltrate into the store the whole length of it.
Now, when you bring people in, and they come in and presumably they're attracted by the meat, have you deliberately laid out other things in a certain way so that they go from one to another in a sequence?
Yes. This is done a great deal by trial and error, and over a period of time we find the most essential spots and the positioning of the goods. In other words, we try to keep a clear gangway as possible, solely for the purpose of getting the people to the bed of the store. We've got the meat counter at the bottom of the store to draw the people round. They come round, and in most cases at the meat, and then they flow into the body of the store, so in the clockwise direction.
Not all stores have a clockwise flow. In some, the flow is anti-clockwise. It depends very much on where the bus stop and the pedestrian crossing is, and on the general location of the store. But the principle is still the same. You make it easy for customers to penetrate into all parts of the store, with the majority keeping to the perimeter.
What else governs the way you lay out your store?
Gondolas are in one long flow. In other words, we like to show as much merchandise to the customer as she walks by, rather than sort of cutting the ends across the gondolas. And if we have a gap in the gondola, which we sometimes do, you'll always walk through the gap right into the face of the opposite gondola, which is bolt right in front of the customer.
In other words, you have corridors going up the shop, but none going straight across it.
Yes, that's true. So if we have a break in the gondola, she walks straight into another gondola which is loaded with merchandise.
I see.
You will find a lot of ways of placing gondolas according to the size and shape of the store. In this store, they are placed horizontally because they want to show off merchandise along the length of the windows. The placing of gondolas so that they not only benefit from the traffic flow but increase its effectiveness is part of the know-how of an experienced store manager. He must also watch the width of his aisles to make shopping easy for the customer. Most congestion is at the meat counter, for choosing a joint is a slow business, so the width here should be between 9 and 11 feet. He must also avoid a feeling of empty vastness such as this. The width between grocery gondolas should be 6 feet, green groceries 8 feet. Now here, the customers are too congested. The space between aisles should be wide enough to take 2 trolleys passing each other. In this country, we prefer to have a break in gondolas, otherwise they become rather uninteresting. But in America, this is not always the case. There, they have long stretches of unbroken gondolas.
Now, the checkout's obviously a tremendously important part of the supermarket. How do you decide how much space you're going to give over to them?
Well, this depends on the size of the store, actual width of the front of the store, the size and shape of the checkout, and is based on approximately 1 checkout to every £1,000 worth of takings at this moment, anyway.
Smaller stores will have a proportionately smaller number of checkouts, but the principle is always the same. 1 checkout to every £1,000 worth of takings. Between the gondolas and the checkouts and the windows, there should be space. Not too great to give an empty look, but not too small to cause congestion.
Now, how do you decide exactly where you're going to put the various types of goods?
merchandise department come in again here. They, by trial and error, have sort of experimented with these goods, and they find that ordinary everyday goods would probably be better in the centre of the store, where it would draw the customer again, and then they would move another one to the side of the store, which would give a sort of a zigzag effect to the customer, and also get her to use the whole of the floor.
Would you tell me then exactly how this particular supermarket is laid out?
We've got the bakery to the top left hand,
Up over there.
Up over the top end. The meat is along the back. The fruit and vegetable is on the right-hand side. Everyday lines, potatoes and goods of that commodity. Customers almost always got to have those anyway. Provisions come to the centre again, which brings the customer to the centre of the store again. We take off to the biscuits, which is a good impulse line. The customer moves off to the biscuits. We sort of zigzag, and then we bring tin soups to the centre of the store. Cornflakes and breakfast cereals and all that to the centre of the store again. Feeding off again to the wall again, to the canned vegetables, canned fruits, essentials, all the essential items.
That's over there on your way towards the checkout?
That's correct, yes. And then we come back into the centre again with the pet's food. Always look after the pet, always come to the pet and collect the pet's food. And then so forth, straight into the checkouts, into the bulk of the checkouts.
I see. The manager would next calculate the total amount of linear footage available to him in the store. He needs approximately 100 linear feet per 1,000 square feet of sales area. Now, this he would find by measuring the base of the gondolas at both sides, the length of the wall shelving at the base, and the refrigeration units. When he's got the total figure, 490 feet, he would then decide the amount of shelving which he could give to each department in accordance with the allocation of space already agreed at boardroom level. Some adjustment is made to these figures in accordance with the amount of profit which comes from each commodity group, and also the bulk density of the product. Cereals and detergents, for instance, the more bulky products, are given slightly more space than they should have in the percentage of turnover because of their size, and the smaller packets, like condiments, receive less. In allocating space, you also have to consider the impact you want to achieve on the customers in terms of the store's image. The manager then decides where to locate each commodity group, and these will be spaced out round the supermarket in the order of demand items, semi-demand items, and impulse sales.
In other words, we don't have two fast-selling lines opposite each other because this is a tendency to block the gangways.
Here, we have been talking in terms of demand, semi-demand, and impulse items, laying these products out around the store, which is known as balance layout.
There are other schools of thought which say that products ought to be put around the store in terms of menu layout, that is, meal by meal. From the breakfast foods, tea, bread, and meat, followed by other items for the main meal. A few stores have come to the menu layouts through experiment without quite realizing the theory behind their practice.
There is yet another method, the daily timetable layout, which starts off with breakfast and finishes with a nightcap, tea and sugar, main meal coffee, and a before-bed drink. On the question of how much space to allocate to each brand on the shelf within the commodity group, this is worked out according to the store sales or market share for each product. The leading product in each group occupies first position in the traffic flow. Giant packs are placed in the middle shelf because they are closest to the hand and have the highest profit margins. See? The small tin is not taken. Strips on the shelving show the amount of space each product should have on the shelf. Also, the manager tries to set out the layouts so that refilling can be done with full cases. And of course, all prices are very, very clearly marked on displays and everywhere in the store, including shelves.
In many stores, the managers are not so precise about how they allocate space to products or position items. They do it by experience. It is surprising, however, the number of stores that combine these methods in practice without fully recognizing the theory. Nowadays, stock items can amount to as many as 8,000 lines, and customers are soon lost to other stores unless enough variety bargain offers are made available to them.
To create an atmosphere of value for money and to combat the fierce competition of today, managers use hot spots where cut-price goods are displayed. A rough yardstick is 4 for every 1,000 feet of floor space, so a store of 5,000 square feet would have an average of between 16 and 25 special display sites or hotspots. You also want to attract a maximum number of impulse purchases by placing related items next to each other: buckets and cleaners, soaps and towels, cheese and onions. Watch this customer carefully.
Could you tell me where the pickles are? Yes, madam, just over here. Oh, thank you very much.
She wanted pickles, but a skillfully placed drawline deflected her, and she bought a tin of fruit juice she did not mean to buy. These drawlines, commodities like greengrocery, tea, coffee and sugar, are intended to attract the customer out of the main flow into the body of the store. There's a woman whose eye has caught the sugar. The meat is in itself a drawline, right at the back of the shop, and this shopper has spied a hotspot drawline, a reduced commodity which will deflect her down the centre of the store. Displays of small items on the end of checkouts make for final impulse sales before the customers depart.
Now, what is a store image? Well, this image is really the air of interest and excitement and novelty which is given to a store by the promotional activities of the firm. It gets housewives talking, it gets them interested in the character of the store. Mr. Warrington, how do you see the image of your own particular store?
Well, firstly, I would like to train the staff to give good customer relations. In other words, a tremendous atmosphere. The customer spends a tremendous amount of time in the store, and after all, we've got to get her back again. And I think if you create a good, cheerful and happy atmosphere in the store, the customer she will respond to it very, very well indeed.
Well, if someone tried to describe your store, how do you think they would do it?
Nice, clean, hygienic looking store, and not only looking but being right, giving a sense of good value, giving a good wide range of commodities, and covering the whole household, including the garden.
And what about the atmosphere?
The atmosphere must be festive, or give the sort of impression that there's something going on and we're really alive, and making the whole atmosphere jolly, creative atmosphere, and a pleasure for the customer to come into work.
Specialisation in delicatessen or continental and foreign foods of all kinds is another store image which attracts more custom in areas which have big foreign populations. And yet another store image is the display of hardware and non-foods. But of course, the store image begins on the outside. This store specialises in the selling of high-quality goods at recommended prices and sees that they are advertised. And this is another store image, selling high-quality goods at rock-bottom prices with a window full of reduced bargain offer notices.
And now we come to the very, very important question of staff.
In most supermarkets, the staff enjoy amenities like restrooms, fair wages, free clothing, good holidays, and canteens.
I like the people, I like the customers, I like the size of the shop. It's a different type of selling to an ordinary grocer's shop. I like the atmosphere. I like the long weekend arrangement. And it's a nice, clean place to work. You get a discount on purchases from the firm. More holidays than an ordinary, than the little man, more or less. I get 21 days. Most of them get 3 weeks holidays.
Well, if I was working in a service shop, I'd have to be in at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning, whereas in the supermarket, I don't have to come in until 9.
You get very difficult customers in an ordinary shop. I don't have to sell anyone anything. They bring it to me, and I just take their money.
There was a happy, relaxed atmosphere about this canteen. The manager was eating with them. We discussed some of these staff problems.
Tell me something, this would seem to imply that once you've got staff, you keep them. Is this in fact so?
There's quite a large turnover.
See, well, why is this?
This is caused, I think, through we employ quite a large number of part-timers and also married women who've got other sort of encumbrances besides ordinary work. And also the young people of today seem to have the tendencies and trip from one job to another.
What proportion of your staff is part-time and full-time?
We've got about, we're arranging 42 in staff, approximately 35 full-time, 7 part-time.
This, in fact, I suppose, is how you handle the big pairs, is it?
That's right, the weekends. Most of the part-timers are engaged at weekends.
Do you train people before you put them out onto the floor?
The floor staff, the ordinary shop staff, are trained on the shop floor themselves. We usually put them with an experienced assistant for a few days or weeks.
Use your thumb and finger, Sheila.
Untrained staff are a manager's nightmare, because if the job isn't done correctly, it can lose profit and can upset and lose customers.
11 and 5 take me 11 and 6, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. Then you count it to your customer. 11 and 6, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. Thank you very much, madam. That's most important.
Indistinct pricing and not restocking quickly enough, so losing trade, are other problems which the good manager must guard against. Just a little bit of haphazard work in a big supermarket with its heavy turnover leads to a substantial loss.
Each staff member takes, on average, £180 per head per week. If we divide the store turnover, £7,500, by the average weekly takings per head of staff, £180, it indicates that we need a total staff of 42. This can be cross-checked, because the cost of labour should represent 5% of the turnover, which equals £375. Divide this by the average salary per head, £9, and we get a staff total of 42.
I then talked to the manager of a really enormous supermarket. I wanted to know how he organised his staff.
Now, with, let's say, 200 people, are there tremendous problems of dealing with them, of having any kind of cohesive chain of command?
Well, there's no problem if the chain of command gets set up. We have one here. I myself a store manager. Under myself there are 2 departmental managers. We have split this store down into 2 sections, virtually non-food and food. And then underneath the departmental managers of those 2 sections, we have section managers covering the specific sections, such as warehousing, delicatessen, fish, non-food household, checkout supervision. These all come under these 2 departmental managers.
I see. And then under the departmental managers, what do you have?
Under the departmental managers are these section managers.
I see. And under the section managers?
They are first hands who are generally specialists in the particular business that they're operating in the store.
I see. And then there are the normal staff?
Shop filling and packing staff. Yes.
Now, members of the staff who have any sort of problem, who do they go to? Their first hand?
They immediately go to their section manager.
Well, they don't go to the first hand.
The section manager virtually is the personnel man dealing with all the problems. The reason for that is, as I said, these first hands are generally specialists in their trade, and they are the people that do all the work that is necessary for the section manager to have in respect of stock control, ordering, stock layouts, etc.
From the manager to the under manager. Here, the manager has seen an empty shelf and passes the word down the line. Under manager to supervisor. Constant check on sales is kept in this way. Supervisor to shelf filler, one of the sales staff. A good supervisor will see that there is never an empty shelf. An empty shelf is a lost sale. Managers rely very much on the staff to keep down the rate of pilferage. This can be a real headache. In fact, there is a feeling that in London there are organised gangs. It can happen when goods are delivered or through a dishonest member of the staff, or, more generally, when the wrong type of customer starts taking things. To begin with, the layout of the gondolas mustn't hide shoppers. Dark corners must be well lit. Mirrors, which are really used only to brighten up stores nowadays, can help if they are strategically placed. From this store, this doesn't look like a window, but it's the manager's office. And from the other side, he can survey the whole store. The aim is to keep pilfering to below 1% of the turnover, which is still about £100 a week.
The opening day of a new store is yet another problem that the supermarket manager has to face. Excitement, a gala atmosphere, and a celebrity. Inside, last-minute instructions to the new staff.
As the crowds pour in, looking for bargains, the manager must be worrying about the special problems connected with opening day. Has he got enough stock? Opening day crowds sometimes throw calculations out. Has he made adequate preparations for the increased flow of traffic? Are there enough extra staff to cope? Well, it's too late to worry now. All he can do now is to keep the shelves replenished and his fingers crossed. And at the end of a hectic day, count the money in the tills and prepare for the next day.
The supermarket man has to be a very different person from his predecessor in the small shop. He's got to have a very keen business sense, and he has not only got a responsible, but a vital job to the community. Once a supermarket is launched, what are some of the operating yardsticks by which the supermarket manager can judge the efficiency of his store? First, is he attracting enough customers? 2.3 per square foot of sales area per week. Are they spending enough? 12 shillings per head. Is he making good enough use of his space? 4 special display sites per 1,000 square feet. Turnover, 30 shillings per square foot. Does he have enough equipment and staff? 1 checkout per 1,000 pounds of turnover, 1 linear foot per 10 square feet of sales area, and 1 staff per 180 pounds of turnover. This is a chart showing the average operating costs of a supermarket as a percentage of the store's turnover. The operating costs are divided into 2 parts. Fixed costs equal to 5% of the turnover, and variable costs totaling 9.5%. So the total operating costs come to 14.5% of the turnover. As the average gross profit is 17%, the difference is 2.5%, representing the net profit before tax. Is there an easy way to remember and use all the figures we've given you? There is. It isn't one we can say is dead accurate, but it's good enough for our purpose, which is to recognize whether the store is operating efficiently or not. There are 12 easy stages.
First of all, count the number of checkouts. Now, the number of checkouts multiplied by £1,000 equals the turnover per week. The number of checkouts multiplied by 1,650 will give the number of customers per week. Multiplying the checkouts by 1,000 and then taking 2/3 of that will show the sales area in square feet. If you multiply the number of checkouts by 70, you will find the linear footage. The number of checkouts multiplied by 5 will give the number of full-time staff. And the number of checkouts multiplied by 1 will show part-time staff. The number of checkouts multiplied by £50 shows the wages bill per week. Checkouts multiplied by 2.5 will give the number of special display sites, which includes gondola ends, of course. Checkouts multiplied by £170 shows gross profit per week. And multiplied by £25 gives net profit per week. And finally, by multiplying the number of checkouts by £6,500, you will find the cost to equip the store.
Well, so much for the theory of it all, but how in fact does it work out in practice? Well, let's have a look at it in a typical supermarket like this. Now, the one great yardstick always is the checkout, or rather the number of checkouts. Just count the number of checkouts, use them as the yardstick, and you should be able to find out and get a pretty shrewd idea of how a store is doing. Now, in a store like this, with 10 checkouts, we'd want to find out, first of all, what is the turnover and what are the number of customers? Well, take the number of checkouts, 10, and assume that they're doing £1,000 turnover per checkout. That means that in this place, they would be doing £10,000 a week. In fact, last week here, they did 10,300. And you can also assume that through each checkout, you get something like 1,600 to 1,700 customers. And in this case, it was indeed last week 17,000. So again, we're pretty much spot on. Now, the next thing you want to know roughly is how many staff and what is the wages bill to run a place like this. Again, the checkouts are your yardstick. Because to each checkout, you should assume that they will need 5 full-time staff and 1 part-time staff. So again, with your 10 checkouts, you should have 50 full-timers and 10 part-timers. In fact, it's 50 full-timers and 12 part-timers, so again, near enough. Now, the wages bill for this. It should be £50 in staff wages per each checkout. 10 checkouts, £500 a week. Here, 508. Now we also want to know about a supermarket, what sales area is available and how much linear footage. Now, using again the checkout as the yardstick, you take each checkout and multiply it by 1,000 and then take 2/3 of that. Now that sounds complicated, but let's work it out here. 10 checkouts multiplied by 1,000 gives you 10,000. 2/3 of that, 6,000 to 7,000, isn't it? So you should have 7,000 feet of, or square feet rather, of sales space. Indeed here, it's 7,500, so it's near enough. Now you want to know the linear footage that's available. Now, linear footage, again, should be 70 per checkout. 10 checkouts, 70 per checkout, 700 feet. 700, 720, near enough. Now, another and last thing that will interest you very much is how much space is available for special displays. That's special display sites, including gondola ends. Here, it should be 2.5 per checkout. 10 checkouts, 10 times 2.5, 25. In this case, there are, in fact, 23. So again, the yardstick is, in fact, working out very nicely. Now, the yardstick has, in fact, worked out pretty well in this store. And the reason for that is that this store is doing pretty much 30 shillings per square foot of turnover. And that, in fact, is what the yardstick is aimed at finding out. Because it may be that the man, any particular supermarket man, is doing more than 30 shillings per square feet. If that is so, then you will know that he is indeed doing better than normal. He may, in fact, be doing a little bit under. What you can find out by using this yardstick of using the number of checkout points and then applying the various factors to them is roughly how well is the man doing. Is he doing average business? Is he doing better or less? This film has only been part of the supermarket story. We hope it's shown you some of the special problems of the supermarket operators, because we think that it's only by understanding and appreciating this very specialized business that we can, in the long run, get the most effective cooperation. And only close cooperation like this, you know, will enable manufacturer and trader to benefit equally.